Annie Oakley was born Phoebe Ann Mosey on August 13th, 1860 in Darke County, Ohio, to Quaker farmers Susan Wise and Jacob Mosey. Annie was the sixth of 9 children. Her father died when she was only 5. Her mother remarried, but he fell into illness. With very little income, Annie missed school and spent much of her time outdoors hunting and trapping. She recalled of the time, "I was 8 years old when I made my first shot, and I still consider it one of the best shots I ever made." Against Annie's wishes, they sent her to the local infirmary with a sister. From here, she worked under families in exchange for a meager wage and schooling. However, she only received abuse. She later referred to her so-called caretakers as the wolves. Not surprisingly, Annie ran away in the spring of 1872 and returned to her mother. The skills she learned in the woods would become valuable, and she sold off the game she caught in Greenville to support her family. Eventually, Annie would pay off her mother's farm from the earnings, and at this time she was just 15. Annie was also fast becoming a local celebrity. And on a chilly Thanksgiving day around 1881, Frank E. Butler's sideshow shooting act was visiting Cincinnati. Frank placed a wager that he could beat any local marksman. Annie stood in line as the last opponent, shocking Frank when the 5'10" teen grabbed a rifle. After a 25th shot, Annie was declared the champion and took Frank's heart. They began a courtship that grew into marriage and found success as a pair on stage while living in a Cincinnati neighborhood called Oakley. It is said that Annie adopted that name based on the many oak trees in the area. By 1885, Frank and Annie joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, where she was given the moniker Little Sure Shot by her friend Sitting Bull. Oakley never failed to delight her audiences, and her feats of marksmanship were truly incredible. At 30 paces, she could split a playing card, hit coins tossed into the air, and even shoot cigarettes from her husband's lips. Now that is one way to quit smoking. Annie was playful on stage, skipping with her rifle, snuffing out candles, and popping corks from bottles. She was quite a sight. In 1894, Edison recorded Annie and her husband performing some of these tricks for history. Around this time, another sharpshooter named Lillian Smith forced a bitter rivalry between the younger Smith and Annie. Stress from the incident may have caused Annie's departure from the stage, only to return 2 years later when Lillian was out of the picture. However, the feud was a reasonable time, as Annie traveled to Europe with the ensemble in 1889. Many country heads of state watched as Annie took a request to shoot the ashes off of a cigarette held by the German Kaiser Wilhelm II. She was a hit and seen as the United States' first female star. She promoted women's participation in all areas of life and once said, "God intended women to be outside as well as men, and they do not know what they are missing when they are stayed cooped up in the house." Annie even contacted the armed forces by offering the government the services of a company of 50 lady sharpshooters if the country went to war. While the message was profound, it was years ahead of her time, and she took to a career as an armory for Western stage acts and taught women how to use firearms. Keeping an eye on Broadway, the couple relocated to Nutley, New Jersey. On an early morning of October 29, 1901, Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show was traveling in 2 sections by train through Davidson County, North Carolina. Annie was unaware of a terrible mistake that was about to occur. An engineer on a freight train misread a telegraph, thinking Cody's train has passed, but the second section of Cody's was coming in quickly and collided with the freight train. The cars were demolished, leaving a wreck that had brought Cody to tears. His favorite horse had perished in the disaster, along with many other animals. Some of the passengers sustained injuries, including Annie, who was temporarily paralyzed. After 5 spinal operations, she was moving again, but decided to tour had its end. Frank and Annie built a home in Cambridge, Maryland in 1913 before moving to North Carolina to show again. In her 60s, she continued to set records and wanted to star in a feature-length silent film. But a car accident in 1922 halted her efforts, and eventually, with declining health, she died on November 3rd, 1926 in Greenville, Ohio. She was interred there on Thanksgiving Day. Frank suffered after his wife's death, and according to one biographer, he stopped eating. Annie has been depicted in countless plays like Annie Get Your Gun, movies and television shows. She's a significant influence on the American cowgirl and even an Annie Oakley festival that's held in Greenville, Ohio. This has been Biographies of the West. My name is Lorin Morgan-Richards. Thanks for watching.